Inflation is a hot topic in 2022, so why don't we dig deeper here? To get a better understanding on the effects of inflation, we need a couple of theories, like quantity theory of money, purchasing power parity, interest rate parity, Fisher equation, real exchange rate, and the Keynes model. The first theory we need to understand inflation is the quantity theory of money, which goes back to Irving Fisher and is about 100 years old and very often empirically tested. So we know that in the long run, if money is printed, so money supply goes up, that for a constant money demand and for a constant real GDP, also prices go up. A good example is Germany's hyperinflation 1923. So the cause is you print money like hell, that leads to more inflation in the long run. You cannot avoid that. That's the main message of the quantity theory of money. In the long run, also purchasing power parity is valid. That means that the exchange rate, E, is reflecting differences in inflation rates. So for example, inflation rate in the Eurozone is in the numerator, the inflation rate of UK is in the denominator. So if UK inflates, has a higher inflation rate than the Eurozone inflation rate is, then the exchange rate goes down. And a lower exchange rate means a depreciation of the British pound. So if the inflation rate in the UK is going up relative to the Eurozone's inflation rate, that means a depreciation of the British pound, and this has two effects. The one is that imports get more expensive, and that once again feeds the higher inflation rate. And on the other hand, export get cheaper for foreigners, so the UK gets more competitive, and that's good for exports. So the Keynes model has an implicit assumption, that's the fixed price assumption. Nevertheless, if inflation plays a role, you'll realize that the real income, which is crucial for consumption, goes down. So an inflation has an effect on the real income, pushing down consumption, and via that channel pushing down GDP, which is the sum of consumption, investment, government expenditures, and net exports. The real exchange rate measures competitiveness of an economy. Let's take the British economy. So there are three channels to get the British economy more competitive. First, the British pound depreciates, the exchange rate goes down, meaning that the real exchange rate also goes down, and that means that the British economy gets more competitive because its products get cheaper for foreigners. So this is one channel. The second channel is if prices in the UK go down, for example, because wages go down relative to the Eurozone. And in this case, British products get cheaper relative to Eurozone products. The real exchange rate goes down, and that increases competitiveness for the British economy. And the third channel is if prices go up in the Eurozone relative to the UK, for example, because wages are increasing much more in the Eurozone, then the real exchange rate once again goes down and the British economy gets more competitive. The interest rate parity explains changes of the exchange rate via interest rate differentials. What does that mean? So we have on the left-hand side of the equation the benchmark interest rate set by the Federal Reserve minus the benchmark interest rate set by the European Central Bank. And on the other side, we have the expected exchange rate. So what we can see, if the Federal Reserve increases its benchmark interest rate, then the dollar should appreciate. And that's exactly what we have seen in 2022. The Federal Reserve in the US has increased its benchmark interest rate before the ECB started increasing its interest rate. Therefore, the dollar appreciated. Same was true with respect to the UK. The Federal Reserve has increased its benchmark interest rate before the Bank of England did that, and therefore the dollar appreciated also against the British pound. So what's the Fisher equation? The Fisher equation refers to the long-term interest rate, which is relevant for investment. So for monetary policy, it's quite important to break the expected inflation rate. So what investors expect for the future of monetary policy, assuming that the real interest rate is constant, then the logic goes the following. So if you break the expected inflation rate by tightening monetary policy, not only for a couple of months, but for a certain time period, then this reduces long-term interest rates, which is good news for investment.